Okay, I think. All right, here we are.
Okay.
Let us know if you can hear us, guys. We're starting just a tad late because we got a little lost. We're doing some research on the writer of tonight's script, and I mean, one of the things that you kind of laugh about Hollywood is there's a lot of people with a lot of the same names, like identical spelling and everything. So there's one, two, three, four, five, up to 15 or so of the same people. So we're trying to suss out which one was tonight's writer. So we got a little off track on that, but welcome, welcome. How you doing, Price? Man, it's good
I'm
to have you
doing
here again.
good. I'm doing good, and it's great to be back here. This is a great show, and I always like being on it.
Yeah, this is I think your fourth time.
I think so. I think it's the fourth one.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is the fourth one. I have a list, and based on availability and stuff, I think you're tied with Raul. Because he's been on four because he had to fill in for someone as well. So that's it's good. It's good. We've got
I hope I hope it makes me like tied for the record.
yes, it is right now. He's tied for the record, which is
Yes.
good because we're getting more like as people's availability and seeing how their schedules are going. We're getting down to a slightly more familiar list, but we're still trying to keep everyone involved because the variety of the opinions is kind of what makes the show spicy to a degree because it's different walks of life addressing the same stuff, kind of like movie reviews and whatnot. So it
Yeah,
works.
it's always good to mix things up.
Hmm.
Have different people and different opinions, but I always like being here. I'm trying to think. We did one that there was a female serial killer that wanted to get into college.
Yep.
There was one that there was a guy that he was miserable and his wife left him. And
Yeah.
the third one, what was the third? I can't believe that I can't remember the third one.
Okay, so well, I can go in like order because I've got them in order. So, the guy goes to therapy was the first one we did. So that's the depressed
Right,
dude because of the girlfriend. I
right,
remember that one. The next one, that was I think the 10th episode. So that would be waitlist. So that's the girl who's killing the people on the waitlist to get into
right.
college. Then the last one you did, which was the 20th episode, so it's not that long ago, only 9 weeks ago, but didn't feel like 9 weeks ago though. That's backcountry. That was the skiing. That was the
Mm,
uh yeah, like
yeah, yeah.
the
They're stuck skiing on a mountain or
skiing on a
something.
mountain. Yeah, yeah. Survive mountain. It's like airplane or sorry, alive, but it's like skiing related.
I wish it was like airplane.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Airplane would have been fun. I mean, because that's the thing. There's been very few comedies overall, but when we do get one, some are okay. Some not so much. Uh,
Yeah, and at least, today was a kind of genre that I actually like, the one that we're going to discuss today, because
mhm.
it's more of a kind of crime-ish one, which is cool. But there's certainly a lot to discuss about it.
There definitely is. So let's kind of get into it. Well, here's kind of a fun fact. So I've got two songs to replace the countdown that we normally have going on. I'm just getting it refined right now because I had to use AI to sort of like see if it worked, and now that I know it works, I'm actually going to be hiring a band and a singer to sing it because I don't want to use AI for the actual final project. I want to get human people involved. So that's what I'm waiting on for now. And then also I got to find like a bumper music to play as I say the show intro and whatnot, just to kind of get it all riled up and what have you, get that energy going, because this is a show about writing, so you got to be energetic. So with that being said, welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track, a look on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is The Price of Reason. We've got an interesting. We got a couple. I have a couple. I wanted to tell you this earlier before the show started, but we got distracted starting late. But next week's episode, was originally going to be another script, but a script on this blacklist that we haven't reviewed yet was just sold this week. So next week I'm going to swap out that script for that one because it was originally going to be read in October, but we're doing it this week because it was recently purchased and it looks like it's going to go into production. And I want to kind of get a jump on that so that all our listeners can follow the progress of this sale to how it gets released, whether it's going to go to Netflix or go to theaters or some other streaming service, what have you. I want to give that them. So next week's script, we're going to have some interesting stuff to talk about there, not to distract from this week's script, because this week's script, as you said, Price, it's a cops and robbers type of story. It's a cool premise on the surface. It's titled Final Score. Placed 40th on the blacklist with 11 votes. And it's written by Will Hettinger. And he's a guy who... Price, why don't you share a little bit of information that you found out about Will? So we
Well,
get you to
apparently
talk
there's a movie called Dyersville, and he just sold it to the Obama's production company. So that's his big... Actually, that's the main thing that I'm looking at on his resume. And even in the article that we were looking at, industry trade article, it was saying that this is the first time that anybody's actually bought a feature screenplay from him, that the Obamas are the first one to buy his screenplay. And I don't want to spoil anything. Let's talk about this script.
Yeah.
And later I'll give you my impressions of what I think is going to happen in the future with his future script.
Absolutely. So yes, he wrote Dyersville, which was picked up by the Obamas. He's been a staff writer for a few years. He hasn't, credit-wise, he hasn't done a whole lot in the last 8 years, since apparently his career started 8 years ago. I think it started maybe earlier, but regardless, Final Score, I'll dish out the log line. It's 2 FBI agents are pitted against a crew of bank robbers and each other as they grapple with order and chaos inside their own department and home lives. Price, share with us the synopsis, please.
Andy Walsh, burdened by self-doubt and stuck in mundane tasks, has his world turned upside down when his keen linguistic skills uncover a critical link in a high-stakes operation against an Armenian crime syndicate. As Andy delves deeper, his determination leads to crucial breakthroughs, transforming him from a passive observer into a fearless key player.
Yes. So this...
I should have been the narrator for those commercials in the 90s.
You definitely... Yeah, you should have been. You've got something going on there. Like, you've got... Instead of the raspy, like, serious thing, you've got more of, like, the intrigue. Kind of like from, like, the mystery radio shows. Remember way back when?
Right.
So yeah, like this...
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying, like, that this I mean, I like the premise, and I like a good cops and robbers story. And
For sure.
I will say this, the first few pages kind of start off pretty strong. But I can see why it only got 11 votes. What were your initial thoughts, Price?
I have a similar feeling as you. When I started reading it, and initially after the first few pages, my initial instinct was, and I didn't know even it was the 11th, the 40th place or whatever. I didn't know anything. I just, within a few pages, I thought, maybe some of the scripts on this blacklist are actually worth something. And this is interesting. This is going to be good. I felt like, based on the initial level of the opening, you kind of feel like there's a setup here for something cool. That was the feeling that I was getting.
Yes. No, I got the same thing. I was only thrown off a little bit because with this bus scene that followed afterwards. But before we get into that, like, this opens up in the midst of a crime. It's very much like, the start of the Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan's film. It's, okay, we got this thing called the cleaning crew. It's 4 men. They look like, duct cleaners and whatnot. And they're entering in a Bank of America branch in Los Angeles right before closing. And everything's all starting off proper until the cleaners pretty much knock out the guards, zip tie them up, and then just start cleaning out the cash drawers. Not the safe, but just the drawers all over the tellers and all that stuff. And they separate their money from the ones with the explosive tags that do the dye and the gas and all that stuff. And they basically force the bank manager to carry those tagged bills or wads of cash and run out the building and down the street to trigger them to go off, so that they can, as a distraction, also to get them into the van and they can leave with the cash and no one being the wiser. And it was all pretty well written and pretty well structured until we get, on the other side of town, we get introduced to our FBI team, and they're doing a not really a raid, but like a surveillance tactical operation to tag this business so that they can surveil them. And they're doing it by, I guess, using one of the LA buses. They've commandeered an LA bus, and it's not a real active bus. It just keeps on passing around, driving in circles on the route. And these guys are so well coordinated. They get off the bus, they go in and do their thing, then get back on the bus when it loops around again. And they do it so smoothly that the bus doesn't even stop. Like, that's how quick they are. And then what throws me off is that for some reason, once they succeed in their mission, the driver, who's also part of their team, decides to stop the bus, and then this junkie, this tweaker, pries his way into the doors to get onto the bus because the bus lapped him like 3 times and he wanted to hitch a ride somewhere. I'm like, this is stupid.
Normally, why would they even stop for this guy? But I know why they wanted to do it, because they wanted an excuse for the gaming guy to pull out an FBI badge. So at the beginning, you don't know if they're robbers. You don't know exactly what they're doing. But now that he shows on the badge, you're like, okay, these guys are FBI agents.
Yeah, but it's just it's a really lazy way to do it. And also, I mean, my uncle's a bus driver. I actually sent him this section of the script like earlier this week. I said, does this make sense to you? He's like, no. For starters, it's really hard to pry open those bus doors from the outside because they're hydraulic.
Right.
And
You
there's
can't just open them by yourself. That would be mayhem if everybody could do that.
Yeah, and the other part too is like all the buses have a hidden switch at the front, usually by like one of the headlights, where the bus driver can open and close the doors manually when they're shut off the engine and they leave or packing up for the night. Even those ones there don't always don't work when the engine is running in some regards.
It is absolutely that they wanted to do the exposition or whatever to tell you that the guy is an FBI, and they were trying to find a way to do it. I would have done it a different way, or even if there was
what the easiest way is? Just have the software that the hacker Paul is doing show FBI on the masthead of it, because it's in the program. They're using FBI software to hack in and surveil these people. They have labels on their end of it. Like, it's pretty easy to...
True, but okay, let's just say I'm going with the flow. The guy wanted the feeling of the guy pulling out the badge, which is kind of cooler than whatever you're saying with the masthead was serviceable. But let's say this guy wanted the cool factor, like, oh, here's my badge. Like, that's kind of the unexpected cool thing. I don't know if it's cool, but that's what he was thinking to himself, the writer.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's say they're driving the bus and somebody, a weirdo, jumps in front of the bus. They have to stop the bus because he jumped in front of the windshield, and they're not going to run him over. And then he stops and he's like, you know what? This is the 3rd time this bus. I'm going to complain. I'm going to file a complaint. What's your driver number? I'm going to complain to the city. And then like the guy pulls out an FBI. He's like, son, get the fuck out of my bus or whatever it is, and like pulls out a badge. And the guy's like, oh, I'm sorry. Did I mean? No, of course I wasn't going to see you. I'll see you later. You know what I mean? At least there you get the effect of like Mr. Big Dick with a badge.
As opposed to this junkie that manages to weasel his way physically into a bus and see all these cops around and be like,
right,
what?
That didn't make sense. Jumping in front of them, they wouldn't have wanted to run him over with the bus.
Yes, true.
So he would have just stood, like, you know how it is, with open arms in the middle of the street. He's like, no, you guys aren't going to pass me. This is the 3rd time this week. You know what I mean? Like, that would have at least... It would have had a little more flavor to it, and he can still do it. Not that your idea wasn't serviceable. If you just would have had that FBI thing, then you would have known the information without as much of a spectacle.
I mean, that's just the other part, too. You want to get it across quickly and not necessarily be an extra 2 days of shooting. Like, that's why when you see things like, opening of the first Mission Impossible. Like... that one there where they've got Emilio Estevez on the computer. Well, guess what? There's IMF on there, and you can tell that they're all coordinating and they're spies. And it pairs into, the title, right? Oh, okay, we get it. This is the team. This is what they're doing. They don't actually show IMF badges or any of that stuff because, of course, that ruins the illusion. But they just get you straight into...
I've always been shocked by the way that Emilio Estevez vanishes from that movie so quickly.
Well, that was the gimmick, man. It's like get a couple of big names in there, at least at the time, and then kill them off to really show that this it's a no hold bars. That even maybe the lead could die.
But I wonder if like Emilio Estevez like didn't get annoyed that that's what he was being asked
I
It's like
think
a
he was all
shitty
fun
role.
for it because the only ones that were really annoyed, at least on the Mission Impossible side, was the original cast that were asked to come back to reprise their roles because they're going to get killed off, and they said no.
I
And
see.
and you know, it basically it runs to the same model that what Disney did with Star Wars, that at the time Paramount wanted to do with Mission Impossible, and the original cast said screw you, and yeah, they walked away. But for this one here, I thought that was my first red flag. Is like you have this convoluted way of, first of all, conveying that this team is part of the FBI, and then and then you just follow. We start following this guy now. What's interesting, which I kind of actually liked, is that a lot of the characters are in their 50s. Our main character, Gaiman, he's in his 50s. He's approaching forced retirement age within the FBI. He's got one of his best friends is Tony. He's 56. He's got a birthday coming up. He's going to be retired soon. There's a lot of characters in this screenplay, and the other part too is we don't always get proper introductions to most of these characters. Sometimes their names will be first, and we're supposed to know who they are. Like there was this character named Speck, which is not a normal first name or last name. And when you're reading it, you're like, Speck grabs this. And we're like, well, who's Speck? We didn't get introduced to Speck. What's going on? Where's Speck? And then about 2 or 3 pages later, we finally get introduced to Speck, who's the hacker who's in his late 40s. And you're just like, okay, so this guy doesn't really understand the proper way of introducing characters.
Yeah, I agree with you. I can, but you know what? I didn't even mind all of that. I didn't mind it. I agree with what you're saying, but it didn't bother me as much. There were things here, even there was a few parts that I think that, you know how there's certain things you have to, when you write a screenplay, you have to do it a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
like formatting wise.
Yep.
And there were a few that slipped in there that were I believe, errors or done in a way that I don't usually see in some parts. I don't know if you noticed that.
There's a few.
It's not a ton, but there were some errors that like there was one one part that I laughed because he left it centered kind of as if it's dialogue, but it was actually a description,
Mm-hmm.
which he probably needed to do on the left side. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it's right after somebody's dialogue, so I'm like, is this character saying it or he's describing a scene now?
Yeah.
There was at least one like that, but
There's
it
there's
doesn't
one
matter. I'm
like
not.
that. There was a little bit of editorializing, but not as much as we've seen in other scripts. So that was also kind of taboo.
Yeah, I mean, usually a script, when it goes by the regular rules and you read it and you understand what's going on, it's done properly. Here, there's parts that he had to sort of weigh in a bit more than I think that you need to.
Hmm.
If you're doing it correctly, I think that you don't need to write it the way he wrote it, but maybe it's just me.
He also has a lot of stuff where he interlaces scenes. Like he doesn't actually give you time of day or anything really that often.
Right,
It's all like mixed with prelapse and stuff. So he's trying to do, you know, Jack Ryan style
right.
narrative,
Back and
and
forth in time. It's like non-linear. He just
yeah,
writes non-linear, and
non-linear.
then you see a scene like it's so vague he doesn't have to explain where it is or what's happening. He just moves back and forth through time or does whatever. I know exactly what you mean. I maybe could have gotten maybe he could have gotten away with all of these things had the story, you know, been as steady throughout the entire script. But go on. You were saying about the thing that they introduced the characters. That's where you were at.
Yeah. So the thing is, like when you introduce a character, you even if it's going to be a secondary character or like a tertiary character, you if they're going to have dialogue and they're going to be a some sort of some sort of role in the story, it's better to like first say, okay, character age, character name, age, uh, brief role. Doesn't have to be huge. I mean, what's interesting is that when we do finally start to meet Pearl. Pearl's one of the characters. Bear with me one second. I'm
Right.
just doing a quick search here. Um, when we do finally meet Pearl and we get his proper introduction, it's 35 huge, dripping with a heroic dose of Copenhagen. It's supposed to say dripping, but it's dipping. So a spelling mistake. And this is on page 5. And the
Right.
thing is that we kind of need to know that his size, because he's introduced 2 or 3 pages earlier, and it's just like we have this character named Mac. Well, who's Mac? We don't know who Mac is. Mac picks the door's lock with a snap gun. Gaiman and the other two, Pearl and Spec, we all meet them. We meet them all. Keep watch. Click, the doors unlock. Gaiman produces a fire extinguisher. It's like, if we don't know that Pearl is this huge guy, um, then we don't really understand like what his role is with regards to the dynamic here. Like, when you say someone that's huge and he's got dripping with a little taste of Copenhagen, it's like, okay, that means he's supposed to be intimidating. And then you have him next to like Spec, and who is Spec? Well, we don't know who Spec is. So is Spec like, you know, scrawny? Is he beefy as well? Well, we don't. We find out that he's fastidious and a bent hacker. It's like, okay, so those are two contrasting type of people next to each other, physically different, personality-wise very different. You kind of need to know that going in. That coming in after the fact doesn't make sense, especially when we've got like their dialogue kind of being peppered out here. Like Spect is talking about stuff and Mac is talking about stuff. Pearl doesn't really say anything. He's kind of quiet at this point. But regardless, it's like we need to know who these characters are so that when we see what the roles are, especially considering the fact that this is a very action-heavy script, which means that there's some decent dialogue, but a lot of the text are scene descriptions and what's going on in the shot. And so if you don't get a sense of who these characters are, and you're just introducing their names, or even not properly introducing their names while you're doing the scene, you've now got confusion within the reader. And not only that, you have confusion for all the people that are doing production and casting. It's like, well, how do we sort and organize these characters? Because they keep popping up without an introduction, so we don't know. Okay, well, what's going on with Gaiman and Tony? So they get proper introduction. So we're allotting two actors for this shot, for this scene, for this day, and then all of a sudden, boom, Mac and Pearl and Spec show up, but not proper introductions. So I mean, they do these things called like quick finds. So they have a certain like code that we punch into a script to tell us where all the characters are and when they show up. And first, normally it's in Final Draft, it's also in Celtics and Fade In and all those other programs. But when you don't do the proper introduction, sometimes the program skips it. And so you don't know you have it. And even with the smart type, you don't realize you have it. So, yeah, when you don't do a proper character description, not only does it screw up a reader who's trying to follow the story when they have to stop and be like, well, who are these characters? Did I miss their introduction? I got to go back. Now you have to stop and go back. You're not reading the story. You're not on pace with the story. And then the same thing happens with the computer. It's like, well, these characters don't really appear until page 17, but their names show up earlier, but there's no proper description to highlight them. So even when you're pulling off your production refinement of the script, you're like, you don't know who's in what scene, what character is going on, or anything of that nature, and it really throws a wrench into the gears.
I agree with everything that you're saying, and when I read it initially, like the earlier pages, I was a bit forgiving, even though I thought exactly what you're saying, because I thought to myself, maybe these characters are just not that significant. They work for that Gaiman guy.
Mm-hmm.
Let me focus more on this guy, and he's the thing that I should be following here. These are just some kind of, just they're interchangeable, just people. They're
Disposable
I don't really
guys.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought, okay, I thought maybe that was a strategy of the screenwriter. I'm like, he doesn't even care if you know who these people are because they don't really matter. They're just working for this other guy. That's how I guess I was forgiving at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and I just said, okay, well, let's just move forward and see what happens with this whole idea. I like the idea that there was a robbery. I like that there was an FBI team. This was stuff that I was interested in. Then, like, as I was sort of interested in what was happening with that, they also introduced that Katie lady. I think at that point that she's sort of the boss of this guy. And
Yeah,
then
the
there's sort of a
senior
weird,
agent in charge, which is, yeah, very much a very FBI title.
right, and they kind of don't really like her, and kind of the conflict there, which is good that there's a conflict that
Mm-hmm.
right out the gate, and then even introducing that Andy guy, who basically
He's the
has
main
his
character.
own.
That's what we find out. But he's introduced pretty late into the story. Yeah.
Right, and he's sort of he has his own kind of PTSD-ish thing from the past or whatever. He's dealing with, things that veterans that served, did tours abroad. They come back and they have issues. And I thought that all of this was an interesting pieces of the puzzle were being presented to us, even if there were mistakes, even if they could have been executed in a better way.
Mm-hmm.
I still didn't mind the pieces of the puzzle that were being introduced to us, if that made sense.
No, the pieces were fine on the plot side of things, and even when we got into like the main characters, because that's the part here. It's like this is more of Andy's story
Right.
than anyone else's. But he comes in late. He's kind of got like this Luke Skywalker model where okay, Luke doesn't really enter until within the latter half of the first 10 minutes. Same thing here with Andy. Andy is this type of guy with a little bit of PST, but he has this kind of lust for aggression that he's trying to suppress.
Right.
And
I like this. This I liked,
yeah.
by the way.
Because this was basically like he's stable when he's got this certain level of power within himself, so to speak. Even though he's committed to doing the best job he can at any time, that's kind of how he balances himself out. But what he really wants to do is he kind of wants to taste blood, so to speak. And that's that's the thing that's kind of crippling him at the same time is the only thing that kind of normalizes him, at least in his relationship with his wife, who's a teacher. And he's just trying to balance it out. But he can't, he's dealing with all this type of stress in a very different way to the point where he literally sleeps on a cot in a garage because he can't sleep in a normal bed. We find out that he feels this way because he's executed a couple of missions that had the wrong intel. And he's told to just kind of forget about it. It's the nature of war or the nature of, conflict. And he's bothered by it because now he's like, well, is he doing something for his country, or is he just a weapon, like, to protect his country, or is he just a weapon at the behest used for his country for whatever whims they have at that moment? And that's what he was trying to reconcile with in this part. And I thought that was a really interesting conflict to give him, because that's something I think a lot of soldiers would feel like if they're doing certain special operations and they're being told this is very important, this is what it's going to do, and then at the end of the day they learn, well, it was done because either a certain person in authority had a grudge, an axe to grind, so to speak, or they just wanted to get some territory and they decided to label these innocent people in this part of the world as the bad guys and then just get rid of them. And then when the truth comes out that they weren't, and they're just like, well, we got their land now, so too bad, so sad, move on. Bigger priority is, the mission and whatnot. And it's basically he's trying to reconcile, like, the ends don't justify the means in that regard. And that's something that is to his moral character, because as Andy, who's on this desk doing a bunch of translations from, surveillance, he gets pulled really out of only because he gets robbed. Like, that's the only reason he gets this job.
That's kind of a strange happenstance or whatever you want to call it. But
yes.
I don't even mind that. I like the idea. I'm trying to think now, and this isn't. We're allowed to talk about stuff like this at this point because it's still early in the movie. He goes and two people carjack him. They take his car. Big and skinny or however they were described, and he wants to kill them. He wants to shoot them, but he doesn't do that. He's struggling with his own aggression. They take off with his car, and the only reason that anything happens is because his wife made some calls about the car getting stolen. Who does the wife call? Remind me, because she called somebody.
She reports the theft to the police, and the police actually end up finding the truck and the guys.
Right, but somehow because of this whole situation with the truck and the theft, that's how the FBI got to Andy, right? That's
yes, because so she, being his wife, when she reported it was stolen, that gets flagged because her name is associated with his, who works for the FBI. So obviously, his high security thing, could there have been something of value from FBI property or government property in that truck? That's where it gets flagged. That's how the FBI knows about it, and it's. We have this kind of almost convoluted aspect where the cops find the truck, kind of just abandoned somewhere. And then the FBI is like, well, you can't put that in the impound for evidence since you don't have the perp. So you're going to return the truck to our agent because we're considering that truck FBI property at this point. And that needs to be used and for security reasons, it's what have you.
But was it did it belong to him or to the FBI? I mean, I'm a bit fuzzy on how the car became.
It feels that way. It seems like, well, Liz makes a comment saying, like, the benefits of having a husband as a federal agent is that you get your property back. So I'm lost. I'm like, is it his or is it not his? Because that's the thing that's kind of weird. And this was something like when I was whenever you work for a company and then they say they give you something, or they give you a reimbursement for equipment that you need for the job, it kind of mixes up like whether or not the property is yours or theirs, and you have to really go over a fine-tooth comb with the contract. Because like when I was teaching for a very brief time after I graduated university, they bought me, you know, a laptop and some phones and stuff like this, but I made sure that if it was their property, none of my personal information, none of anything I was doing was on that. It was all for the job. And when my contract ended, they took the stuff back, and I had nothing to worry about because I had nothing of my personal files. I didn't use it for like my personal emails, didn't use the phone for any personal calls. There's
naughty videos and stuff.
Nothing of that nature. I never wrote a screenplay or a book on it, because why would I waste my time on another company's resources? That's just, you know,
not that I'm suggesting you
stuff.
watch naughty videos, but I'm just saying that if you wanted to,
if I wanted to, it would be a bad idea to do it on that. Yes.
Right.
And that's something I learned right away. So I'm thinking maybe this is kind of a similar situation. Maybe he purchased this truck for them, and the FBI reimbursed them, and they said, well, it's under your name, but it's considered federal property. And then once you're done, we'll clean it out and then you keep it or something. It's really tough because they don't specify it enough.
It would have had to. They really needed to explain. You know, the funny, and this is the thing that prior to this show, I spoke to you for a few minutes, and I told you either there's something wrong with me, or this script at times has parts that are at minimum a bit confusing. And then you said, no, it's not you. There are parts of the script that are like this.
Yes.
And I really felt relieved, because I thought to myself, maybe it's so sophisticated that I need to read it again, because there were so many questions like that along the way that I'm like, that I just had a few follow-up questions of things that needed to be established. I mean, they don't necessarily ruin the movie, and at least in the earlier parts, but they certainly could have been fleshed out more.
Yeah, well, yes, he brings up, sometimes he brings up an idea and he doesn't develop it. And that's kind of what the problems that I saw in this script kind of peppered throughout.
Now, if he would have brought up these ideas, but then at a later point of the script, suddenly he addresses them and resolves them, I'd be like, okay, this guy is playing like 4D chess, but this guy isn't playing even 2D chess. You know what I mean?
No, he's not.
He's playing like 1D chess.
No, because what we have here is we have a very isolated story. So typically in these kind of fun little cops and robbers types of things, you kind of want to give the audience a little perspective of who the bad guys are and what they're doing. You've got that in movies like Heat. You've got that in Breaking Bad has a bunch of that. We don't just see the Walter White stuff. We also see some of the DEA agents that are trying to find him and what they're doing. We see the conflict of perspectives, and we understand the motive, and we understand what's kind of at stake with both teams. With the FBI, it's like, well, this is kind of a publicity bad for PR, because the FBI is not being able to capture these bank robbers that are able to get away outside of normal operating hours. So yeah, they're hitting these jobs, these banks, pretty much right before they close. So there's a minimal chance of, you know, innocent bystanders being harmed and whatnot. And they're not trying to kill anybody. There actually has been no true injuries in there. But I did think it was kind of funny where Katie, who is the senior agent in charge at the FBI with regards to this tactical unit, says that, one of the bank managers was asthmatic, so when she was running away at gunpoint with the blue tag, the explosive tags and stuff, the smoke and tear gas inside triggered her asthma and it almost asphyxiated her, and so now we're chalking that up to attempted murder. It's like, well, that's involuntary attempted murder. But the FBI is going to go for the more egregious charge, because after all, that's just what they do. They don't care what the actual crime is. Whatever the more severe one is, that's what they're going to go for, as opposed to the one that's most likely easily to get a conviction. So I mean, and that's a whole nother set of weeds to get into with regards to the FBI. But I do find it interesting that, yeah, we've got these criminals. We don't know anything about them. We don't really know who they are, and they're kind of like this little. They appear like they're, the big anchor of the story, but it ends up being a little bit of a red herring, because Gaiman is in the middle of an operation where he's trying to go after the Armenian mob, and this is like takes place, I think, in 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
I guess.
And somehow, through very interesting convenience, the Armenian mob is somehow connected with the cleaners, and that just kind of works out for them. And we don't understand really why Gaiman is so obsessed with taking these guys down. They've been after them for like decades, and they've finally got a couple of confidential informants that are tipping them off, and they're figuring out the hierarchy, and they know all the players, and it's now all they have to do is just kind of nail them on something. And here's the question I'll ask you, because I asked it of myself, Price. What are they trying to nail them on?
You know, I didn't fully understand that. I guess they wanted to nail them because they're mobsters. I don't.
Yeah.
You're right. I didn't. And these were the times where I wish you would have been next to me when I read the screenplay, because I kept thinking to myself that maybe that's it. Like, you know, this writer is like, he's so wise and sophisticated that I'm not able to follow his weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't fully understand what the investigation was, except for they're mobsters, they're bad, and he has to take them out or arrest them or whatever it is. But it would have been nice to hear a little more about what their crime was.
Yeah, because what we don't find out till much later that one of the crimes they do is that they're pretty decent at laundering money. And we're like, okay, here we go. Here's something. But what else are they doing? Why are they so heavily armed? What are they laundering money for? Like, are they just a money laundering service, or are they laundering money from other grifts or operations that they have throughout the region? We don't know.
In a crime movie, it's really cool to know a little more about what the criminals are supposedly doing, because if you're not convinced. Sure, I mean, I can believe that there's an Armenian mob and that they're doing bad things, but it really helps to have a little more context to really feel the suspense and the action and really get into it.
And what's at stake?
Just sort of saying that they're bad and whatever is it's very one-dimensional again.
It's very, Goal and Globus from the 87. It's like, these are the bad guys. What are they doing? Well, they're going to abuse women. And like, okay, yeah, that's bad. But what crime have they committed? Like real crime, that gets the attention of the police.
Goal and Globus would at least have like the most like macho, testosterone fueled guy walk in the room and just start blowing everybody up, left and right. And then you know exactly what type of movie you're watching. It would be kind of preposterous, and if it was any more sophisticated, you wouldn't feel like you're watching a true Golan Globus movie. But that had its own charm to it in kind of a D-level type of movie that's sort of almost like a guilty pleasure. This movie doesn't do that. You know what I mean? It's not one of those Charles Bronson movies that he walks in and just like, does whatever Charles Bronson does.
He's like, do you believe in Jesus? Yeah. Well, you're going to meet him. Bang. Just like exactly. Like this script would have benefited a little bit more if we knew, okay, this is the mafia. Okay, great. We got this mafia thing, this Armenian mafia. What is it that they're doing that's causing so much attention for the FBI? Because again, there are criminal elements throughout the world where they aren't on the radar of certain government agencies because they're not doing anything that actually really upsets those government agencies. So if one gets on the radar for something like the FBI, especially in this area of California, it's like, well, you got to show us what they're doing so that we want to, root for our heroes to get them. And we never get that at all.
No, we don't.
Yes, keep going. Sorry.
I'm just saying that the movie, you're right, but the movie doesn't even counterbalance that with something else. Like I said, and also it didn't need to give us 70 hours of exposition of why these guys are bad. Right. It could have been just a few brief scenes. If it was like Golan Globus, there would be like an office with a guy with a cigar, and there'd be like a woman there, and he'd like slap her on the face, and some guy would come in and he'd like, "Where's my drugs?" And like that would probably be the establishing scene. But you know what? Even
with like
that's
Cameron
better
Mitchell
than
in it
nothing.
or something. Yeah.
even that's better than nothing. At least you're like, okay, women slapping around and drugs. At least you're like, okay, well, I get it.
Got it. Exactly. It's I mean, the other part too, it would have been more interesting if they said, "Hey, let's follow the money from the cleaners," and it goes from hands to hands, and then it goes into the Armenian mafia. It's like, okay, well, so we're going to take our 20%. Here's the good money that you can spend and do what you want.
That I
Adios,
like.
guys. And you're like, oh, okay, there we go. But
That I
that
like.
revelation doesn't even come as a confirmed revelation. It's all speculative, and it comes like 50 pages into the script later. It's like, well, okay, now we're here, and it's all convenient. Like, why would the cleaners go to the Armenians? Like, there's nothing establishing them that they are connected to that
Right.
family.
I didn't understand if I missed something there also when suddenly they're like, oh, now they're bringing this, now they're bringing that. Like I told you before we started this stream, this was very, very convoluted, and in places that needed more details and more building of something, it was really lacking, which is a shame because generally the pieces of the puzzle here are here to do something interesting. I mean, you have a guy, the PTSD guy, that wants to be aggressive and wants to do action, but he's kind of being held up. He's in a marriage. He's trying to be kind of reserved, and that the marriage isn't great and all this stuff, but like he wants to kick ass. I like all of that. You have this like hotshot, almost retired agent that does everything not according to the book, and he's sort of fishy and slippery, so you're not really sure what's up with him. You have this kind of ambitious woman that's trying to run the thing, but she's just, nobody even likes her because she's like the head of the department. There's a lot of interesting things you can build here. This was like a good setup for something, and the more you read it, the more you just kind of scratch your head and you think, what are you doing? Whoever this Will Etherton guy.
Well,
It's Will Hettinger, or whatever his name is.
Will Hettinger. Well, what he's doing is he's taking things that would work in an episodic structure, and he's trying to compress them into a feature film.
Well, you said that he started off like doing a series on TV or something like that.
Yeah, he was a staff writer on Painkiller, so it's a crime. That's a crime
What
drama.
happened on what was Painkiller? I don't even remember what that is.
Oh gosh. Okay, so if I'm
Is that the one where
it's a Matthew Broderick miniseries.
I didn't watch
about
it.
the opioid epidemic and all the stuff in that. Yeah.
Was it any good?
No.
I remember that one came and went. There was a moment that I thought of watching that, but I just didn't get a chance. I remember seeing it. I'm like, oh, what's this thing with Matthew Broderick? There were a few other people in it. There was Matthew Broderick and I think two other people.
Taylor Keach is in it. You know, he's a guy that Hollywood tried to make into a star that just nobody wanted to see.
Oh, okay. Is he the guy that was?
He was in John Carter. He was John Carter in the John Carter of Mars, the Disney film in 2012.
Did they then try to put him? Was he in the terminal list, or am I now?
Was he in Terminal List?
I think I'm confusing him with somebody else. Let me see for a
Yeah.
second.
No, he was in Battleship. What else was he? No, he wasn't in Terminal List, but he was in American Assassin.
The terminal list. Yes, he was in
He
it.
was in Terminal List. I don't remember.
Taylor Kitsch, yeah.
Okay.
The reason why I know he was in Terminal List is because I remember thinking to myself, everything this guy has ever been in has been stinky, and he's been stinky in it, except for the Terminal List, which I thought to myself, man, like, finally they put him in something where, like, he's not embarrassing himself. That's just my personal opinion. Nothing personal against him.
Well, I think also Friday Night Lights, because that's where he kind of got his start. But he wasn't a main character in that. He was a supporting character, but for like five seasons.
And
right?
I think that True Detective, I remember a season that he was in, and I also couldn't care less about him there. Really, the only thing that I thought he was interesting was the Terminal List. That was the only thing, not the main star of it, but at least like he had sort of a key role, and that one, I thought he was decent in that, but. Oh, so he was in Painkillers. In Painkiller, who was he with? He was Matthew Broderick, Taylor Kitsch, and there was like a third person.
God. Well, Clark Gregg was in there. You know.
I see.
Oh
well.
He's a character actor though, but he's not a leading guy. He's
Clark Gregg from Avengers.
Yeah, from Avengers. He was also in a sitcom with Julia Louis-Dreyfus for a while. He did the TV series Agents of Shields. Actually, I think their friendship is how Julia Louis-Dreyfus got into the MCU, because he played her ex-husband.
He was married to Jennifer Grey, by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
Not that that matters, but you know what's interesting? Matthew Broderick was the boyfriend of Jennifer Grey, and then they had that accident abroad at that time, and then she was married to Clark Gregg, and you're saying Clark Gregg and Matthew Broderick were both in Painkillers.
And both in Painkillers. Yep.
It's a small world, isn't it?
Well, I mean, Hollywood's not as big as people think it is, actually. I mean,
Oh,
it's
that was
both
kind of
big and small, where sometimes you can work there for years and not meet a lot of people, and in other times you realize, oh, you're literally like one person away from knowing that other person. You know,
that's true.
that I mean, like I've been in restaurants where there've been some huge A-list celebrities sitting behind me, and I didn't even know because you're focused on the person you're with at the time, and you know that's just the way it is. And sometimes you do have the opportunity to introduce yourself, sometimes you don't. Heck, I was friends with someone who was one of RDJ's personal assistants at Team Downey for 2 years, and I knew that she was a personal assistant. I just kept on forgetting what the actor was because she never really would say the full name. And then you're like, oh wait, you're with Art Downey Jr. You're just like, oh yeah, he's a fun guy. Well, Susan is who she spoke with all the time, of course, but like you just sometimes you talk so much about the work and the other projects that you're doing, you don't talk about like what paying your bills at that time, because it's not about what you're at now, it's about what you're trying to get next. And that's where you end up missing out on some opportunities if you don't dig in. And it's a hard skill to do, because sometimes a lot of people don't want to say that they're personal assistants to certain celebrities, because this means you barrage them with projects that you hope that their boss wants, and they don't want to put their necks out there to pitch them a bad idea that their boss is like humiliated by and says no, and then you're fired and out of a job. So you got to balance that pretty carefully.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I think I kind of got us off the topic.
No, I mean it's quite all right, because again, this is a very weird script with a lot of weird interconnecting players.
We're convoluted like the script.
It is a convoluted script because
it is very
the basic
convoluted.
plot is that Gaiman wants Akhavan, who is the Armenian head of the Armenian mafia. And why does he want him? Just because. He has a fake story about how it took his wife and kid, but it's a lie. And it's a.
This is also something, and I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
Go ahead.
This also just came out of left field. It's like
page 70.
By the time this is revealed, it doesn't mean anything or matter to me. I'm like, what? Who cares? So he lied about it. What? Why did he lie now? It just seemed so out of left field at the part that they already like discover it, and irrelevant at that point, really.
It's supposed to be a twist, and it doesn't land, and then it's walked back, because it comes in, out of a 116-page script, this information comes in at page 70, which basically says the whole reason he's so obsessed is that it took his wife and kid. Okay, you fake set us up with that, because Gaiman has his favorite prostitute that he patrons,
right?
And she, goes through his wallet, and I'm like, well, he's already a terrible FBI agent because he left his wallet accessible to a prostitute.
What is this? On one hand, he keeps boasting on what a quote-unquote alpha he is and how great he is and how he's like the best, and he's really built it, like everybody respects him. Like he doesn't do things by the book, but he's like the best at what he does or whatever it is. And at the end, he's like with his prostitute friend, and she's just like going through his credit cards and stuff. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I mean, I also thought it was kind of funny how he's 56 and he says he has more stamina than the 20-year-olds, but it's like, you just established that the sex with her was kind of short and that she was waiting for something to happen and nothing did.
Right, that was also weird. He's like, oh, like you never had it this good, did you? I don't know, the whole. I
was wondering if she was like, if the writer was trying to convey she's secretly rolling her eyes in her mind at this guy.
That would have been more interesting. There's so many parts here that, to me, I can't believe that this is a final draft that somebody actually presented to studios, and that even it made a list that people were actually considering it. Mm-hmm. All of these things surprised me. I would think that this script is, in a way, when it comes to subject matter and potential, it may have had one of the best potentials out of all the ones that I've done with you until now.
Yes.
And when it comes to the execution, it may have been one of the worst.
It's pretty up there. I mean, the one thing that kind of hurts it is it's the plotting and logic, because some of the dialogue is quite good.
Yes, there's something there, but it just keeps falling apart and falling apart. And we were talking about it. I could have put up with the first and second acts had the third act really delivered on some grand finale that ties all the loose ends and if there's all these things planted throughout and set up, if it all brings it home in the third act, I would have been like, okay, this guy is good, he knows what he's doing. But instead of that, we got the exact opposite. It completely falls apart into a million pieces. And by the time this screenplay is over, and I'm not going to spoil or anything, I'm just sitting there thinking, wow, like how did this guy manage to blow it this way?
You know what I would probably compare it to? The difference between a vacation and a staycation. Like a staycation, you stay home, it's safe, you get things done around the house just to kind of get things in order, so that when you go back to work, everything is kind of balanced, and then when you get a time for your next vacation or time off, that's where you actually leave the country to go or leave town to go do something fun, because all my ducks are aligned at home. I don't have to worry about anything. All that's fair and done. Now I'm going to go out on an adventure. This screenplay is like, oh, I'm going to have a vacation premise, but I'm going to execute it like it's a staycation. Everything's going to be very safe, very organized, and I'm going to be moving things around, and it's going to work for me, but it's not necessarily going to work for any guests that come into the house. It's not going to work for anyone else who's living here as well, because you've rearranged all the furniture and the clothes, and it doesn't make any logical sense to anyone else except for the person that wrote it.
Right.
And
Or
it just feels a little bit too safe, because we have that whole subplot of Andy and Liz. They're going to a psychologist because Andy's distant at home, yet the moment he starts killing people in the script, he's getting a bit more human, a bit more intimate, a bit more brash, and Liz is liking it, and she's confused as to, like, for years her husband has not been this way, and now he is. And he's just saying, all I'm doing is I'm translating, for this TAC op team. And it's not until, like, the bow breaks where, his boss, Katie, calls his wife and says, yeah, your husband's been shot. He's okay, but he's like part of the actual tactical unit going in on, frontline missions and stuff. That freaks her out. And it's like, you don't really... It doesn't. She learns about it off screen. Like, that's how you're going to do that
right,
for us?
that was weird too. That was so weird. And the other thing that was weird, I mean, there's one thing here, but here's a scene that I actually liked. That they went to the restaurant, and suddenly, like, Andy was more take charge, and he pulls out the bill and greases the guy, shows him the badge or whatever it is that he was doing. Sorry, he showed him the badge, and he's like, hey, I'm FBI. And then they set up like a special table for them. I liked all of that. That actually, I wanted to see more of that, but that only came once in a while, a moment like that in the screenplay. I thought that, like, Andy becoming more sort of cool again and his wife actually liking it, even though he's lying to her, I didn't mind all of that. There was a good idea there, and somehow they still fumbled it.
They did, because, again, this is part of the TV writing that I saw coming through. Some important stuff was done off screen. And
Yes.
we're told about it later. It's like, no, this is a movie. Show us that. Show us, have this moment where he's at the hospital and, he's covered in the red dust and all this other stuff from one of the things. But we're going to get into this part because this is actually our threshold. But this is actually an important distinction to do, because if you're writing a screenplay, this is kind of how you want to do it. It comes across as cliche, but it actually hits really strong. And that is, you have him in the hospital, you have his boss there, he's getting patched up, what have you, and then the wife shows up and she's mortified, and she's there because she loves him, but she's also angry because he lied to her. That's where you have that scene, and then you
Right.
make them come to a head. And yes, it's a cliche, it's been done a million times, but the thing is, you want to do that because that is the more authentic interaction. Like, when
Right.
your spouse finds out you've lied to them and you nearly died as a result of it, they're not going to hide and run away from you. They're going to explode in anger, and then maybe they'll leave you. But the thing is, you have to do that anger first, and you can't just have it done over the phone and then that be the end of it. Because how does it play out later? Oh, they're just arguing at home, and then she goes to the bathroom and she's so angry she doesn't even bother slamming the door. That's how angry she is, and we're like, I want to see the anger. Like, because that's how you
Exactly.
figure out the level of conflict and what's at stake. And yeah.
And there's certain twists here that we don't want to spoil for people listening. But what I'll say is that uh, they build up this character of Gaiman in a way that you think is going to play out really interesting and intriguing and cool, and somehow everything about it at the end is just so random and
Out of character.
weird. It's never. There's so many things, and this I'm not spoiling. I'm just saying there's so many things that happen, especially in the third act of the movie, that with no planting whatsoever. It's a bunch of payoffs that nobody ever planted even one seed for these things to pay off. They just happen to happen, and nobody gives any explanation. And I see one thing that there's no explanation for, and then there's another thing there's no explanation for, and another thing there's no explanation for. It almost feels like J.J. Abrams wrote the final third of this movie.
You might be right, because it's just so all the here's the other part too. You have the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and at no point are they ever doing any real investigating, because all they've got is a couple of CIA characters that actually tell them what they need to know. And I'm like, well,
Right.
that's very lazy investigation, and it's because of these CIs that they have that they finally figure out who one of the guys of the cleaners is, or at least somehow involved with the cleaners. And to me, I'm thinking, okay, well, that might be authentic to the real world, but this is a movie. We need to see them on the ground, boots on the ground, figuring out stuff themselves, because that's what makes mysteries and suspense crime thrillers like this interesting. It's not, okay, we paid this guy and he's going to tell us what we know. Well, that's the writer kind of tipping their hand and saying, like, listen, they need to know this information, so I'm going to give it to this character so that they can give it to these characters so that we can move the story forward, as opposed to, well, let's properly plant some things around to make it all work out. Like, so one of the takeaways here is that there's this new character who is not well introduced, and you brought this up in our pre-show, because I too was confused about this. His name is Jeremy Harvey, and he's connected to the cleaners. He did some jail time, I think, and then one of his relatives is a higher up in the Bank of America, and only the Bank of America has been attacked in all of these cleaner robberies, various branches throughout the LA region. And this is something that we get this information primarily through, I think, David, the CI, tips him off on it, or they're spying on him, like they hack into his phone and that's how they get the information, which is kind of okay, but like David still gives it up. Where I would have been more like, well, go the inside job angle, because technically that's what it is, right? Like someone high up at Bank of America is giving information to his cousin, who's ex-con, who's using that to stage these cleaner robberies. Well, what you would do is you'd have your whole team of the FBI agents be doing background checks and relative checks on all the people at the Bank of America who would have information about security operations. And then you'd be screening all the people that had relatives that were in prison and how soon they came out and the time between when they left jail and when those robberies occurred. And you'd start narrowing it down and down and down and down and down. In actual investigation, you can have really fun little brief scenes of them doing that and showing them that these guys are the best at what they do. Instead, you've pawned it off to using digital magic, which would be, hacking phones and whatnot, along with confidential information, which just does not feel as clever or interesting compared to a real mystery. And it goes to show you that this guy probably did not read a lot of mysteries. Or watch as many mysteries as he
And I don't
paid
think
attention
he read
to.
or watched anything ever in his life, because like even a standard episode of like you think of like an 80s show like A-Team or Knight Rider, the
Yeah.
criminals make more sense to me in that one. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
the very basics of having some kind of twist here and having the parts move correctly. He's not able to do it. The one thing that I'll tell you is he has a few ideas for an interesting character. Maybe some of the dialogue isn't bad, and that's really what's deceiving here. That there are parts of it that aren't terrible if you look at this specific interaction or little bits of dialogue or maybe one page of the script. But when you really just look at the way the script is structured, I think that if this is like I have studied in a class, in university, I've studied writing, screenwriting even, and if I would have handed this screenplay into a class like this, I would have gotten an F.
Yeah. No,
I can't imagine
100%.
like a grade aside from F like on this screenplay.
Actually, you know what? You'd probably get an F plus because there's dialogue that's good.
Okay,
But
you
I
know
mean,
what?
it would
Maybe
still be a fail because your
you know what?
characters are the last act kills the movie. That's the thing. The last act kills it.
even if, let's say, like the professor, it's early in the like in the semester, and the professor is he's feeling super generous. Maybe he could give like a C minus. You know what I mean? Like, let's just say he's really, really being nice and he wants to be encouraging. He's not expecting yet like a Tarantino level script. Maybe he could give a C minus. Certainly, and I'm saying that as a student. This isn't something that I would think that you could go to and submit it to anywhere, really.
No,
And
I
to
would
say like
say C minus is probably a little generous. It'd be 60% because the first two acts
generous.
are okay. Because a C minus is
D
like a
plus.
70, right? But yeah, like a D plus maybe. Because the first two acts you could argue, okay, they're setting something up. But the last 30% of the script, it's you betrayed your premise, you betrayed your gimmick, you betrayed your stakes, you betrayed your enemies, you betrayed everything that you were setting up.
Everything. And to begin with, let's also be honest. The reason why I didn't hate it is because, these are things that we've seen in a lot of movies. Some mobsters, some FBI guys, some intrigue, some superiors, some inner
A clever
politics.
crime, yeah.
Some action, yeah, all this stuff is stuff that we've seen before. There's no wheel that's being invented here. But sometimes you look at these kind of classic elements of movies and storytelling, and you still enjoy them. I will still enjoy a good movie with some crime and some criminal elements and some cops and robbers, like you say, or whatever you were. I don't know if that was the term you
Yeah, it's cops
mentioned,
and robbers,
but
yeah, essentially.
something like that. I like it, even though it's been done a million times. These things are fun to watch. Sometimes they're interesting, and if you, it's not impossible. There are much tougher things to write than something like this, and this guy has something that's not crappy about him in the way he writes dialogue or sets up certain situations. But man, he really needs a lot of work. And the fact that the only person that ever wanted to produce a feature film of his is Obama, that's weird too. I don't understand any of this.
I don't get it either because we've been covering stuff a lot and some vagaries with a few specifics here and there. But one of the things is Andy gets one of the turning points in the script in the first act is that Andy gets pulled onto Gaiman's team through convoluted means because again he gets robbed, gets flagged by the FBI, and then Katie, who's the senior agent in charge, finds out that one of her agents got robbed, and then does a background check on him and says, "Why the heck are you at a desk? You should be on this TAC team. So I'm going to force you on there, but you're not really on there to do the TAC team. You're there because I need you to kind of spy on this Robert Gaiman guy, who is cavalier, and he walks around like he owns the place." And one of the aspects I think that kind of worked out well, and this is kind of true to a couple of the FBI agents I have interacted with through research purposes before, is that they act like they are above the law. Because, for all intents and purposes, I'm sorry to say, they kind of are. Even though they'll deny it, often, who arrests the FBI, really, when they commit a crime. So that's one of the issues I thought was cool here. It's like, oh, we got this kind of, this cavalier guy who thinks he's above the law. He pays for sex, but he's also flirts with a lot of women, and he's, very testosterone driven. Looks of himself as an alpha male, but does a lot of beta attitudes, which
right. And this is the other thing, that this is like a guy who's a beta who read something about an alpha male. I think the guy that's writing it, nothing personal, I don't know him, but I'm just saying that it's like it's the beta mindset of what an alpha would be, and in his eyes, I guess an alpha keeps walking around saying, "I'm an alpha, I'm an alpha." It's why don't you just
exhibiting a lot of arrogance. I'm like, no, alphas are kind of timid and confident, and they don't get in your face about stuff unless life and death is on the line.
I feel like Andy could have been more of an alpha, yet somehow they keep talking about how this Gaiman guy is the big alpha, and the other guy doesn't respect that he's an alpha, and he's an alpha. Mm-hmm. I feel like the term alpha isn't what this author thinks it is.
He has a different definition for it, yes.
Right, and he has the definition of a beta who read about what an alpha is.
And it's funny because what ends up happening is like Andy is forced onto this team. Everything is observation at this point.
I have to add another thing. Also, this shift was very quick. They're like, hey, sorry. They're like, hey, you were carjacked. Now you should work here. But wait, why are you working here? Now you have to do this. Now you have to do that. Why don't you go here? Hey, now you should be in charge. It's like, this
He's
doesn't
being
work like a
pulled in a
flea
lot of
market, the
directions.
FBI. Things move very slowly. Yeah, and I don't think every second you could be in a different role.
Yeah, well, the other part too, and this is one of its biggest faults, and this is something I try to have all writers avoid, is don't have your movie take place over a very long time frame. Keep it tight, because this movie takes place over the course of a year.
It does?
It does. I mean, some of the pacing makes you realize, some of the pacing makes it seem like it's not, but it does, because when the screenplay starts, Tony is 3 months away from being forced retired, and Robert's a year away. And then by the time we get to
Right.
the end, he wants a 1 week extension beyond his birthday so that he can wrap up this
Yes.
case. And we're just getting the highlights of what's happening over these several months, up to a year. And the thing is, you kill your urgency that way. And that's kind of one of the things you don't want to do, especially when you're doing like a cops and robbers thing, or especially like a mystery. Like, even though investigations do take a very, very, very long time in order to get all the
Well,
facts straight and
they
whatnot.
did try to put a montage that he's investigating or something. There was
Yep.
something that they tried for the passing of time, but it's just so randomly shoved in there. I don't
It's
know if you
because they
remember
do that
there's a
non-linear
montage.
stuff, and they actually jump between past and present and flashback and whatnot, and it jumbles everything around, so you actually can't really get a good sense of how much time has really passed until it's spoken in dialogue.
And the flashback and forward, I never think that it's strong enough. I understand that in some cases they wanted to show you something, maybe it's okay, but I just feel like it's quick and random, and I don't know. I didn't love that either.
It's not one of my favorite techniques, and it's because it's so difficult to nail down and make it work. Like, that's the other part too, because anytime you're doing a flashback, you are essentially stopping the story to tell of a smaller story that, if you can do it well, actually contributes to the current story, but more often than not doesn't always really land. And so it's really just kind of better to be like, well, just put it slightly better in chronological order if you have to, without a time jump. Like, there's just other ways to execute it. And this one
It's
here,
easier. It's easier on a TV show, and especially one that has credits. Because if before that I always saw in Breaking Bad that if they ever wanted to retcon or like show you something that you haven't seen that somehow becomes relevant later, they would use the minute or two before the credits and maybe present you with this without even explaining. You just suddenly see a scene that took place like 10 years earlier, and then
like the
like
teaser,
you hear
yeah. Yeah.
you hear the theme song, like the theme music. It's very short, boing, boing, and then like it starts and they're in present day, and nobody ever, I like that. That actually usually works because it doesn't take you out of the story. It's like a little.
Well, it's your
y-
teaser of the episode. They're usually under 2 minutes. Like, the best ones are under 2 minutes, and it sets up what the episode is going to about, or the consequences of what happened in that teaser.
Right.
And that's how you kind of do it. Like, Star Trek is a brilliant example. The best Star Trek episodes across the main series, the original series from 66 all the way to 2005, the best Star Trek episodes have teasers that are 4 minutes or less. And if you don't have a teaser that's 4 minutes or less, you end up having a pretty subpar episode. And the reason being is because if you cannot effectively establish within 4 minutes or less what your episode is going to be about, then the rest of the episode is not going to know what it's about either.
Right. But as opposed to the more like teasery, I agree with you with Star Trek. I always like those teasers. But I'm saying, like, in Breaking Bad, sometimes they would. It's almost like they knew within a season that there were certain things that they wanted to introduce. But if they don't retcon certain things into the story, maybe some things won't fully land. And then they'd use those early minutes before the episode to show you stuff that sometimes initially you wouldn't even know why they're showing it to you, but over time,
It
that
pieces them
introduction
together,
and
yeah.
that information would be valuable.
Well, that's also what they did with Better Call Saul and all the black and white flash forwards,
Right.
right? They did
Worked
that
well.
really effectively there. And you know what?
Yeah.
That technique works in television a lot better, but in feature film, it's really hard to do that, because you go into a feature film, you're expecting essentially a linear story of sorts. And sure, you can argue Tarantino and Pulp Fiction. It's like, well, yeah, but those are vignette stories. They're different. And at the end of that movie, you realize, oh, they're told out of order in regards to the chronology, but each story has its own beginning, middle, and end with it. And that's kind of what you're seeing. Very, very different. And you can't always do
Very
that with
different.
anything
He just
else.
knows what he's doing. There's certain people that can get away with stuff like that because they know what they're doing. Tarantino knows exactly what he's doing. Did it brilliantly in Pulp Fiction. He can get away with it. This guy, Will Hettinger,
Hmm.
I don't think he has that kind of talent. Obama may see something in him, but I don't.
Yeah, I think he's a dialogue touch-up guy at this point. I think that's what he
Maybe
is, and he's
dialogue touch-up. That's what I would give him. You're right. I don't want to throw him under the bus.
no.
If you
I think he's
needed,
got potential down the road. This was just not. This is not something that I think warrants him to get another job necessarily right away.
no, I wouldn't hire him. I would tell him like you need to write one screenplay that makes sense, and then maybe somebody will employ you. But that Hollywood rewards him, and out of all people, I wonder. I mean, when it says the Obamas, do you think that Obama himself wanted to hire this guy, or do you think that it's like people that work for Obama?
Most likely people that work for him. Because again, he's got his own production company. He's got a deal on Netflix, contract with Netflix. So it's not this script that's going to be produced and put on Netflix. It's that other one, which I think he sold that one based on this one getting on the blacklist. Which
Right.
again,
That's what I'm
it
saying.
goes
Like,
to the outside area of Hollywood because again, these are a lot of there's a lot of producers who read this stuff and they all cast their votes based on what they like. These are not necessarily the best screenplays in the industry. These are not also the worst screenplays in the industry. These are just the ones that have made it to producers' hands that they like, and to some degree, if the writers who have submitted have really good representation, they also have wined and dined those producers to vote for those scripts so that they can use that whole the prestige of landing on the blacklist to get a deal, which may have happened in this case.
you are proving why the system is problematic and corrupt because
Well, this is one aspect of it, yes.
I mean, until now, we've done four. I've only been here for four scripts that we've done together. All four of them weren't great. I mean, there were ones that had more potential than others, but all of them ultimately kind of surprised me that they were considered ones that are on this blacklist that everybody's so raving about. Even if they do take them or don't take them, that they would even be considered. These four all seemed rather amateurish to me, and somehow, like I said, this one maybe had the most potential, but the execution was probably the poorest.
It's
Especially
up
because
there
of the third act.
Oh no, I think the third act is what killed this script because
Killed it.
you could do a lot with the first two and be fine, but the other part too, and this is kind of the tragedy of screenwriting in general. This is prior to all the changes that had occurred, in a decade ago, and we're just kind of resetting from before. Is that writing is hard, and a lot of the stuff that you see or read that causes you to raise an eyebrow as to how did this get here is really just because the competition around it was worse. And in most cases, that's how it is. Or here's the other part too. Sometimes there's a script that's just getting its legs out there that's really good, and it hasn't actually come up to the start line of that race compared to the other ones that made it into the blacklist of that year or this year or any other lists out there with popularity. It's just about the timing. Like I have friends who literally the last day that you'd be able to do voting on blacklist, they finished a screenplay that is absolutely phenomenal. So next year, it probably might land on the blacklist or it might land in someone's office and be sold. But that's just the way that the timing goes. It's like this is the pool of scripts at this time that came out this year around this period. This is what they read. This is the stuff that they liked, and it's a kind of a blind aggregate because you don't necessarily have to submit to the blacklist. You just have to submit to the producers that would then vote for this thing for the blacklist, and it's a weird system. But this is really
Screw
just
all these people. I think they suck, and their whole system sucks, and nothing good is happening.
well. Remember, it's only 11 of them that liked this, right? The majority didn't. So that's what you have to consider. Is like, oh, okay, so there's 11 with bad taste.
Maybe it's bad luck. The four that I read that anybody would they would be in first or 40th place is embarrassing.
Well, I mean, listen, the four that you read, they were
Hold
different. Yeah, what's up?
on. 1 second. I hear somebody at the door.
Okay, sure, no bars. I'll vamp.
Hold on.
So yeah, you're not wrong. Like again, this is what part of the show
It
is.
was a mistake. No, everything is great. I'm back.
Okay, that was quick.
That was very professional of me. Yes.
Well, this is part of the industry itself. Is that the tragic aspect is that even though you or I or anyone else listening could say, oh, I could write something better than that, there's a slim chance you could. But the other thing you also have to remember is that you have to be, your taste has to be in sync with the people that are writing the checks. And
Right.
if the people that are writing the checks have bad taste, and that's going to be the flavor of Hollywood, or at least their area of Hollywood for that time, until someone with better taste, with maybe a little bit less money, but enough of a work ethic to get things moving and pushing a story out there that hits big, kind of starts to steer the industry into that direction. It's just the way it is. And again, like, even as I'm reading this script here, I'm like, yeah, the third act really kills it, even though it's got a lot of action set pieces, and it would be a lot of fun for stunt guys to do and actors to talk about how cool and crazy it was doing all those things. It's like, well, it's inauthentic to a lot of the characters and the setup of what you've done. Because let's talk about the preamble to that, because this is something that causes the fluctuation and to our dismay as to why this script kind of falls apart. So they find out one of the guys that's part of the operation of the cleaners. They find his home, they bug it, and they find out exactly when they're going to do their next hit at the Bank of America in Los Angeles. And so they decide, right, this is our plan. We are going to replace the security team and the bank officers in the bank with our guys for the whole day. They're going to be running the bank and business as usual and whatnot. And so when the cleaners come in for closing time, they will be ambushed by the FBI. And Andy's like, this is going to be a shootout. There are going to be a lot of people are going to die. Like, they're going to kill their suspects as opposed to arrest them, because Gaiman is kind of that cavalier. And so what Andy does is he manages to sneak into Harvey's apartment and then draw on his neck with a marker and then leave a message saying, like, whatever job you're doing tonight, it's not being done, and you're retired. You're done. You're not doing this ever again. And he manages to do that without being detected by the FBI, disables all their bugs for that brief moment, then resets them, leaves. And then their team is in the bank on the stakeout waiting for them to show up. And, a couple hours go by and they don't show up. Gaiman is really upset, doesn't know what's going on, flustered. And what does he decide to do? He decides, you know what we're going to do? We are going to pose as the cleaners, hit a bank, and we're going to leave behind DNA evidence that we gathered from Harvey's place when we were bugging it, so that we can at least arrest him for the crimes that he did commit. And that's where it kind of lost me a little.
That the whole screenplay at that point falls off a cliff.
Yeah.
It crashes and burns.
Because that's not even the twist. It's just a out of left field
No,
moment.
I just don't want to spoil it more. It's like, that is the moment of the screenplay that it starts just falling apart. And every time you think, oh, it kind of fell apart here, then it falls apart even more.
Yeah.
Like, but by the end, you're just, you don't have a script. I don't know what it is that you have there by the end, but it's just, it's a complete, if, like we were talking about grading in the college or the university or whatever it is, Act 3, that one's an F. Like, if somebody just has to give like a grade on that third act, it is an F. There's no D minus. There's no kind of D. You can't be generous with it. It is an absolute F.
Because it betrays all the characters. It's a convoluted way to force Andy and Gaiman at odds with each other. I mean, you do have the dramatic irony aspect, which we know and Andy knows that he's the reason why these cleaners are probably not going to be continuing their operations ever again. But Gaiman is now, oh, son of a gun, I lost this guy, this team I've been hunting for. And Gaiman has been setting up that if he captures them, he's allowed to go back to going after his mafia guy beyond his retirement age. Like, so he's got something at stake for it.
Poor setup. If whatever his motivations are, it's so poorly set up. You know what? Sometimes there's that saying, keep it simple, stupid.
Yes.
Sometimes in a crime thing like this, you don't want to try to outsmart yourself. And certainly not, what's his name? Will Hettinger, which I think just doesn't have the capacity to outsmart himself. If you know what I'm trying to say.
I think he's writing above his weight class, yeah.
Yes, he's punching above his belt. And what's happening here is that he should have done something very simple. This is what I think should have happened. Gaiman is a guy that works in the FBI that maybe his superior suspects that he's not always on the up and up. For whatever reasons, one better than that carjacking thing, I think a better setup. Andy is introduced to this lady who basically she wants to try to add new, a fresh set of eyes or whatever to his team. She somehow, in kind of a clever way, injects Andy into his team because she knows of his track record in the army, and she wants somebody like him on Gaiman's team. And then you have almost like a Donnie Brasco type of situation, where on one hand, Andy, all the PTSD, all this stuff, a lot of it is being resolved by his work with Gaiman, a guy that he's looking up to and he's developing this relationship with. But at the same time, he sees things that maybe aren't 100% with how Gaiman is doing stuff, and he starts having a personal conflict with how he should address them, and if he should sort of go against Gaiman and like tell his bosses, should he be loyal to them, or maybe at the end, like the soldier in him has to have Gaiman's back. These are good ideas to explore, and there was a good movie here to do, especially if you established who the players are when it comes to the crime, when it comes to the mobs, when it comes to the cleaners, how they all work together, what their ties or not ties to Gaiman are, and you create this kind of interesting thing where for a long time you're not sure what his involvement is. You know what I mean? There was an interesting idea that could have been done here in just a very simple way. But this guy, he tries to do so many things in so many places at the same time that at the end nothing comes out well. And really, the place that you really feel how much he's failed at it is that third act, where it all, instead of coming together, it all just falls apart.
It really falls apart, and I think part of the reason why it falls apart is that you don't need the Armenian Mafia subplot in that at all.
No,
you could cut that all out, and it's just, we just got to get the cleaners. Great, boom, there we go. Cleaners.
Yes, the cleaners.
That's
cleaners are embarrassing the FBI. The FBI has to do the cleaners. Now, maybe even you do that. This lady suspects that maybe Gaiman is in on it. You know what I mean? And she doesn't know, and she's keeping the cards close to her chest. She finds Andy because, kind of like in The Untouchables, like, oh, you want an apple, make it fall from the tree, or whatever it is. She brought her own guy in there. She throws them in there. And that's her guy.
Yeah, because she has every reason not to trust a guy who's basically, he's approaching retirement age. He doesn't want to retire, so he's being, stubborn. And on top of that, his methods are questionable because he's outlasted like 2 or 3 leaders that have been in her position who have been promoted up. And she's just like, if this guy screws up in his whole cowboy attitude against this case that's been embarrassing the FBI for the last year, she's out of a job. He's not going to really be punished. He's going to be considered a nobody. And she's still in the early parts of her, like she's in her early 30s. She's still in this, this is early for her career. She has nothing else after that, and she's worried about it. And rightly so. But the thing is, they add in this extra crime family, which he squeezes and wedges in to fit with the cleaners. But the worst part is that we get no closure with the cleaners, other than that Jeremy Harvey guy. We don't know any of the cleaners' names, don't know what the roles are, how they're so good at what they do,
don't
anything.
Also get it, and we don't learn enough about the mafia, the Armenian mafia, to really appreciate anything about them either.
Right. Like so again,
because
it's one-sided story.
He can't focus on one thing. He has ADHD. You know, that's what I think, that his structure and of the story, it feels very ADHD. Let's jump here. Let's jump there. What if these are here? What if these are there? What if this happens? What if that happens? And it goes back to what you were saying, and you used an analogy. I'll use a different one. It's as if somebody is like 20 feet tall and they buy a house or they build a house, they're going to have to build a house that's right for their height. So I suppose that, like, if they have to put the microwave somewhere, it'll be 20 feet high. But then if you go to their house, you probably won't be able to access their microwave.
Yeah, that's true. You might not be able to get their microwave because it's 6 feet out of your range.
Right, exactly. So this guy in his mind may have thought that he's doing the greatest stuff ever. Maybe even in his mind he fleshed out all the ideas, but he certainly didn't do it on paper.
No,
maybe
I
he's
think
improved. Maybe he's now, like, on top of his game. He maybe this thing, the Dyersville, whatever it's called, and Obama's people were blown away by what they saw with them do with that screenplay. I don't want to, people can improve. Maybe this was the first time he'd ever written a screenplay, and it was stinky. And then he suddenly, after writing a mediocre TV show, he suddenly became good.
Maybe. You can only hope.
I'm not suggesting that he's failing upwards, but
he might be getting better. But again, in this case here, I think he, I think all he has going for him is the dialogue, in
No, I
spots, but the
liked what you
plot
said.
wise and the rules.
You said dialogue touch up. That's it. That's what
Yeah.
I think he is. If you write a screenplay, or if you see a screenplay and like everything is kind of very dry, the dialogue between the characters, I believe that as a guy that does dialogue touch up, he could deliver the goods. That's the most based on this. Unless this Dyersville is really like, it's a revelation. He went and he bought those kind of books like how to
Writing for dummies.
write. Right. Screenwriting for dummies. He wrote it, learned how to write a screenplay, and he suddenly became the best. I don't want to take that away from him. Some people really, they go through do 180 degrees, and maybe they learn something.
Well, you're supposed to get better with every script you write. So ideally, that's what happened here.
Right,
Hopefully.
and this is the first time he ever wrote anything in his life, and
On
now
his
he
own.
got to write another one, so maybe he improved. I mean, I can only assume this is the first thing he's ever written in his life.
I mean, it's the first thing we know of that that's been released that he wrote solely on his own. There might be many others out there that we haven't read before yet, but I don't know. All I'll say is that yes, dialogue-wise he's good, character-wise he's okay, plot-wise he did not follow through. I think in what ended up happening is that he had an idea for a story in the first act. He knew he had the type of ending he wanted to write, and he just did not know how to get there with the second. And everything that he was doing with the second act was leading to a different third act. And because they didn't line up, he just forced it in there, and that's why this script just did not work. It broke both legs and knees on the landing.
Yes, this was this didn't even it's not even like a bad landing. It's a complete crash of the aircraft.
I mean,
into,
yeah.
a mountain.
Listen, there's not really much else we can do without getting into the spoilers, which I don't want to do because I do want to encourage people to read the script because you can learn from it. You can actually learn how to
not write a screenplay.
Well, how to not ruin a third act is how
right. If you want to see two acts being built up somewhat with a lot of mistakes, but being built up in a way that's somewhat interesting, and then a third one that just kind of flushes the whole movie down the toilet, this would be a good example. Really, really good example.
Yes, and if you can pick and then look at it, be able to look at these types of scripts more at a distance compared to your own, because then you can actually start picking up. Well, where did they lose track here? Why did they do this and all this stuff? And then you take those general thoughts and then you apply those as questions to your own screenplay. And if you're able to answer them and it affirms the question, then you've gone off the tracks, and that's how you get yourself to get back on the right track, and not end up with something that fails like this. So with that being said, Price, let's not surprise anybody with our rankings. Is this a green light or a pass for you?
Pass. And just so you know, we've had those other three that we did together were stinkers, but I told you, you know what? If you take a small budget, if you make it for $1 million, those other ones, rather than some big budget of $50 or $100 million, maybe for some TV movie of the week, I was telling you about the other ones, they could be a TV movie of the week, like a Lifetime movie or one of those things, Movie Network, but this couldn't even be that. This doesn't even qualify for the movie of the week. This is I give it a no. They were all failures, all four of them, and I didn't greenlight any of them. But I said that under certain circumstances, if they cost almost nothing to make, maybe it'd be worth it to somebody. But I don't even think this movie is that. It doesn't even $1 million I wouldn't put on it.
Yeah, it's
Okay. I want to say this thing. If for some reason, and again, these aren't actors I like. I'm just saying that it'll make its money back. If for some reason, who do the kids like Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, and bring all those
if you got Tom Cruise to play Robert Gayman and you got, say, Glenn Powell to play Andy Walsh, you'd probably get some money back from that.
Right. I mean, if you did that and you got an all-star cast of people, and you throw in Timothée Chalamet as I don't even know as who
he could be
what.
he could be David, the Armenian CI who gets beat up all the time because people want to see him punched in the face. So
he's the Armenian guy, and you got the other two. You got Tom Cruise and Glenn Powell, and that's your movie. Yes. Somebody would probably pay $1 million for that. Maybe they'd even pay $10 million and they can make their money back. But that I don't think those people would want to attach themselves to this movie.
No, I I don't think so. It's not without extensive rewrites to the point where it's going to be an unrecognizable film. They'll probably try and make it more like The Town, which I would say that's a better goal to have than what you end up having on this side here.
Maybe he was hoping. This is what maybe Will Hettinger is kind of like a hustler. He's not very good at what he does, but if he writes a script and then some people come in and fix it, then he could still get the credit as though he wrote something, and maybe other people that know how to write can fix it.
Well, it'd be trickier because every writer, when they come in to do a rewrite, wants to get the main credit and push out the initial guy. So I don't know if he'd win an arbitration, given how much rewrites would have to be done on this.
Maybe when he wrote this screenplay, he was even willing to accept that he would be like second fiddle to a real writer.
That would be smart because, again, that's kind of what you want to do to sort of get your legs is like, okay, if I get retained story by credit and then I get this guy taking the screenplay credit, I can at least,
foot in the door.
Yeah,
say,
parlay that into another thing and go. No, 100%.
You can then Kathleen Kennedy would hire you on the spot if you did that.
And I don't know about that, but like the thing is that again, part of the industry is that you do have to have a hustle. You have to be able to talk a really great game, but at the same time is that you should be able to deliver on equal to that game. And if you can't, that causes your reputation, which is the most valuable thing in Hollywood, to waver. It's like, oh yeah, he talks a great game, but all of his executions are crap. They don't do what we need them to do. And yeah, that's harder to roll out of. I mean, you got to keep pushing at it. I mean, the famous story, Chris McQuarrie, he started off strong, had a couple of bombs, kind of was in a writer's director's jail for a while, and then he kind of worked his way back up and partnered with Tom Cruise, and then now he rewrote Mission Impossible. He rewrote Top Gun Maverick, and he's doing the Mission Impossible movies with Tom Cruise, and now he's one of the top tier directors in the industry and writers as well. So like, it can happen if you know how to do the hustle, know how to deliver, and squirrel yourself away for a few years just to redefine your craft and get back on track, and then jump back into the game. It's a lot of work.
I also think that Christopher McQuarrie benefited that Tom Cruise knows a lot about movie making, and he needed a guy that could just fill the roles that he needs to on that team and sort of complete what he needs completed there.
At the same time, complement what he's trying to do, because that's the other part, right? It's like, Tom Cruise, I want to do this type of stunt. We got to make it work in a movie. Well, if we got to make it work in a movie, these are the rules we have to hit. Tom's like, yes, you're right. All right, how do we hit those rules? I'll get back to you in 10 minutes. And then, that's how it works in that way on a collaborative process. And then
I really feel like that's Christopher McQuarrie's strength, that he gets Tom Cruise. He understands exactly what his shtick is, and he's there to sort of help bring his visions and his ideas to the screen. I think that Tom Cruise needs a person. Tom Cruise has to be on screen, and he can't take care of every single aspect. And I feel like Christopher McQuarrie is a guy that is on the same page as him, understands exactly his quirks and how he does things and what he wants. And that's why this kind of partnership works. Sometimes you have this kind of situation. I don't know if Christopher McQuarrie was without Tom Cruise, if he himself just had to write a bunch of movies and direct them. I don't know exactly. I'm not saying that they wouldn't be good, because I don't know, but I don't know if they would be as good.
I would suspect they would be enjoyable, but low advertising tier. Like, you have to make a little effort to find those films.
Right.
Because his name on its own will not draw in an audience on the same level that Tom Cruise was to this day. And that's one of the things you have to think about with this script is like, okay, if you're trying to cast this script, yeah, you're going to need a lot of big names in order to bring people in. And they're still going, and if you don't change it, you don't rewrite it to make it good, people are going to walk away probably mixed. They're probably going to say, well, the action was fantastic. And then others are going to be like, I just didn't understand how he got to that action. Like, I didn't get the twist and turns. And then you'll have some of the defenders be like, well, it's just a movie you have to turn off your brain and enjoy. It's like, that's just one step away from death. And they talk about that. They like, sleep is a cousin to death. And I'm like, yeah, so, that's the thing. And sleep is a cousin to death. And then, turning your brain off to watch a movie is the second cousin to that. So don't try and tell a story that fits that dynamic. Try and tell a story that engages your mind so that you're on the edge of your seat going, what's going to happen next? And that's kind of what you want. And this is the premise that is ripe for that. And instead of the what's going to happen next, it's the other rule that I said, which is the one question you never want an audience to ask is, what the heck just happened?
Right. And it's like you're just bringing us full circle, giving closure to our conversation. Before we started today, I actually contacted you, and I was really, I thought to myself, maybe I needed to read this more times because there were so many moments that I was, it's not so much that I was confused. I knew what I was reading, but it confused me that that's what I was reading, if that makes any sense.
Yes, the content did not reflect the language.
Right, exactly. It's like so many ideas, like head scratching, just head scratching
Yes,
moments while reading the screenplay, and
and not the
it's
intriguing
unfortunate.
ones.
I really wanted to like it. I like crime. I like cops and robbers. It's exactly the type of screenplay that I wanted to like. Maybe that's why I was even especially harsh with it, because the guy that has a girlfriend that thinks he's an idiot. I don't really care. It's not a story that really draws me in to begin with. The girl even that wants to get into college and kill people. I didn't really. I wasn't feeling that one especially. The ski could have been a little better. There's some skiing there. Maybe you can interest me a little bit in that. But really, in this case, this was up my alley. I
Yeah.
would have liked a movie like this done well.
Well, one of the things that you just pointed out there is the vast diversity of the types of stories that we had, and like this one is definitely more leaning more on the higher concept side of things. The other ones are a bit more medium or low concept. Like again, romantic comedy that wasn't very funny.
Right.
Serial killer that wasn't really much. That was just weird. I mean, that's the best
Right.
way to
It
do
was
it.
just
And then you
weird,
have a
and
survival
you
story.
never.
Then there's the survival story. And then you have this one, which is Cops and Robbers. People love Cops and Robbers. Cops and Robbers are great. Lethal Weapon is fantastic series. That's Cops and Robbers. I mean, and that's kind of what you're trying to aim for, is you want to get those types of dynamics. But the only way, like great stories, well told, makes sense. And this one here was losing its sense midway through the second act. And then right when we get to that point, when we got into the third act, it's like, okay, we have now thrown out all the the medication that keeps you sane, and we're just going straight out, guns blazing, still a robbery, but like it doesn't make sense. Nothing set up lines up with this execution or this goal. And it feels, as I said earlier today, it feels like it's a TV series condensed into a feature film.
That's never a good thing.
And it's never a good thing
and
also to
again,
do the opposite. Take a feature film and extend it out to a TV series. So,
And again, to do the closure thing here, it's that early on, even in our conversation before the show, you're like, "Oh, he wrote for TV. He did a TV thing." This very much feels like a TV writer. But even as a TV writer, I think he could have done better.
I think he was trying to overcompensate for that with the end, the third act, and how big of a set piece it was. I think that's him overcompensating for the fact that he's a TV writer.
He's like, I don't want anybody to discover that I'm just a TV writer. Why don't I do another heist here?
Do another heist, make it big, make it grandiose, lots of gunfire, lots of explosions, all that type of stuff. Who wins? Who knows? Whatever. But a lot of the stuff that they're doing out there, I'm like, you could all see this done on like a network cable show, cable procedural. It's not cinematic in style. The stakes aren't huge. I mean, even when Gaiman is like banging that prostitute in the first act, I'm like, it's kind of funny. It doesn't feel like it's cinematic or anything of that nature. It's just
No, it felt like just out of left field. Nothing. They tried to revisit that he gets upset that she's talking to like a John or whatever it is, and I'm just
another
like,
guy. Yeah. It's
I didn't even know what the point of that whole thing was. Maybe to show that he's getting unhinged, I guess. I don't even know. Again, there were ways to use different elements here. It's like there's a puzzle with a lot of different pieces. You could have taken a lot of these pieces and created a puzzle that makes sense, but at every turn where this guy used these pieces, he used them, in my opinion, incorrectly.
Yeah, it's like the Homer Simpson creating solving a puzzle effect. He's got the pieces
Right.
on the table that they kind of fit but don't quite, so he uses a hammer to bash them together to make it
Right.
work. But the picture is blurry, or it's unfocused, and it's not right. So yeah,
That is a good description of what happened here, unfortunately. But again, I don't want to seal this guy's career. I was not impressed, But you know what? I have to give people, like you said, sometimes people over time they improve.
Hmm.
Maybe like we said, it was the first time he ever wrote anything in his life, and now maybe he can write something. Maybe he can do better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll cross my fingers for it. If this other movie that
Yeah,
he
I don't wish him.
sold does
I wish
well,
him
it's
well. You know what
good.
I mean? It's not like I wish him anything negative. I do think that if there's going to be like a 50 top 50 list of people writing stuff, it should be better screenplays. And I think that this guy's place should be taken by somebody, in my opinion, better. You know, do you get what I'm saying?
Oh
If
yeah,
there's a
like
list
again,
like this,
this was there's 75 scripts that made the blacklist last year. This placed 40th. We've already read a couple that were lower than this one that are far better than this script. And they were only off by one vote. So I mean, yeah, this guy he's lucky he placed this high. But
it's a disgrace, in my opinion. But and it
it's
shows why
not
this whole
very. It's more telling to the producers that voted for his script than it is to him as a writer. That's the other part.
it's a corrupt system, and this list, I feel like, is worth nothing. I am not impressed with this list. I don't like what I've seen on this list until now. I think that this list should have the creme de la creme of new writers. If you're going to make this list, you want to tell me that of all the writers, possible writers of screenplays, the top 75 in a given year, you know, that Hollywood would consider, that the four that we've done together were on that list is just a disgrace, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, the thing is that it's not rated on the rating for the blacklist is not necessarily on quality. It's just what the producers liked, and that's kind of the problem,
Then
right?
they should quit the business immediately, and they should be replaced by people that care about that. That's why all these movies are stinkers all the time. There's so many that we see in recent years come out that you then later hear that they invested a ton of money in, and how many times in recent years have you seen like a high budget movie and you thought to yourself, how did they approve this script? You know what I'm saying? It's happened to me so many times that forget about the agendas and
Mhm.
propagandas and all
Oh
that.
yeah.
That just basic storytelling. You think to yourself, how did they approve this?
Well, the way that I've always seen it is that a talented name, got involved, and that's what secured the approval. And that's
It
usually
has
the
to.
case.
Then the system has to be revised. There should be there should be a different system, or things should work differently, because this right here shows a huge issue, in my opinion, of with the system. That's my
Oh no,
personal
you're
opinion.
you're not wrong. Like this is part of the show is to highlight like again, it's what producers what people are writing, what producers are reading. And if this is what they're reading and liking, that's closer to the target of where the industry is going and why it needs a revolution. It needs producers that number one know how to tell stories, know how to make movies, and are not just guys with business degrees who know how to play the stock market or know how to, in theory, market a product, because that's the after effect of what happens when you get a great script and a great cast and a great team together. It's like, oh great, we have all these great elements that are into this story. Now we just need the best people to sell it so that people understand that this exists. Instead, what they're doing is they're taking people that already exist and then they're attaching them to stuff that's just subpar product to elevate the subpar product to try and sell, as opposed to the opposite way around, which is that the product needs to be really good. You then need to attract the best people for it, and then you need the marketing team to sell them how this magic lightning in a bottle worked and was shared. It's not done that way. There's this reverse engineering and this compulsion, line of sight compulsion for production that just does not benefit the industry well. Now, unfortunately, this has actually been part and parcel for the industry since the 40s. Like it's ingrained with them all the
Right.
time. The biggest difference that's actually causing the exposure to, or causing the paint to chip off the facade, is that the quality has kind of been on a decline generation by generation. Like you're not getting movies with really great quippy dialogue and interesting characters. You're getting them kind of flat, kind of on the nose. There's a lack of nuance. There's generations of people that never really were allowed to exercise their own thought process on analyzing story and what it means and why we like things and whatnot. It's all like consume, don't digest. It's like consume and purge. It's kind of like an anorexia type of thing. It's like, oh, I watched this movie. Now I'm going to forget all about it. But I'll still say I liked it and whatnot. But I'll never remember anything important about it or what that movie stood for or what the people behind it were trying to convey, whether it be a moralistic message or showing the drastic effects of a mistake when you don't actually admit to doing the mistake itself. Like any of those types of general universal concepts that allow us to connect with stories, those are completely thrown out and discarded by a culture of consumers as opposed to a culture of people that embrace and want to be enriched by the stories that other people have to tell, and then hopefully are inspired to tell their own stories. Like that's how it works. We don't have that anymore, and apparently some people are trying to contact me at the same time. Looks like we're both busy people tonight. So yes, I'm with you. I'm a pass on this script as well.
Busy than not busy.
Yeah, so, and I'm with you. I would pass on this script. I'd give this writer all the notes that you and I discussed and be like, listen, throw out that third act, rewrite it to fit in line with what you're trying to do. And I'd also say, ditch the Armenian mafia. You don't need them. Take all the pages you spent on that, focus on the cleaners, give us something of who these guys are. Take a look at Heat, take a look at, The Professionals, take a look at, I'm trying to think of some other ones. Take a look like the 7-Ups. Like not many people have seen that movie, but that's a really good 70s cop thriller. Take a look at real crime movies where it's, even The Town, where it's good versus evil. Back. Heck, The Departed is a great one. You get to see Jack Nicholson's side.
Yeah, The Departed and The Town is good.
Yeah,
totally. This even felt. I was thinking of Point Break, because he's kind of befriending. That would have worked well if they she sends him in as undercover to try to find out if they're dirty or not, and then there's kind of a Point Break thing that he's kind of with them and they're crazy, and he sort of likes their lifestyle. They're not surfers, but you know what I'm saying. Something about the vibe of the bank robbery with those guys and how he wants to befriend them, and he kind of looks up to them, but then he also is trying to arrest them. It's been done in a lot of different movies, not only with bank robbers, but there was something here that could have been done better. And I agree with everything you said, and I would say the same thing to him. I try to be nicer than I am now. I feel like you were nicer than me. I was kind of a douche, but
It's okay.
I would try to be nicer to Will Hettinger, but he doesn't need me to be nice to him, because he's selling, while I'm reading his screenplay, which isn't very good, based on his screenplay. He sold a script to Obama, so what do I know?
Well, I mean, listen, if you sell a screenplay, that's one, notch in your belt. But the goal is to keep on doing that. And, I wish him the best, that hopefully he can sell more, because, listen, he's got some talent in the dialogue. He needs a lot of work on structure, plot, and logic.
Totally, and character development.
Well, yeah, or paying attention to his characters, because he abandoned a few of them.
Right. Starting an idea and then running with it.
Right.
Well, it doesn't matter, though.
Well, I mean, it goes back to I've mentioned this book before, Anatomy of a Story by John Truby. Honor your premise. Stick to your premise. If this is what your premise is, don't betray that premise. And this story in the third act betrays the premise. Betrays a big part of it.
Agreed.
And yeah, so I guess that's kind of the best we can say at this point. Again, for anyone out there listening, if you want to read the script, you can search for it. It's out there on the Googles. If you're having trouble, just send me a DM on Twitter at ScriptDoctorPhD, or you can join the Patreon and you can reach me that way, and I can get you the script. As always, don't spoil the script and don't try to make it go viral. As we've been discussing prior, this is a review show where we're not trying to spoil the script, but just judge it on the writing and its quality, and also see, in the near future, what will happen with this script. And next week's script was purchased this week, so we'll be talking about that, and that will be another journey we can follow to see how that story was on the page and how it will shape up and change when it hits screens, if it does hit screens, which, again, a sale does not always guarantee a release.
No, not at all.
So, yeah, with that, Price, is there anything you want to plug before we wrap up tonight?
Well, to anybody that's listening here, first of all, on Thursdays, there's a great show. I have two channels. I have Price of Reason, which is regular movie and TV reviews. Lately, I've had a little less time for them, but I'm going to start doing those again more regularly, probably within the next month. And so that's my regular Price of Reason channel. Then there's Price of Reason Live, which is a live stream channel that I started maybe, I don't know if it was half a year ago. And that one I recommend, especially for people who like this channel, because every Thursday we, I say we because Script is a co-host of that panel where we go over Quantum Leap episodes from the classic show, and it's called Quantum Leap Revisited. So I think that people would maybe enjoy it. Watching this would enjoy that. That's called Price of Reason Live, and the show is on every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern. And I think that's it.
Yeah. So yes, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight to talk about this script for your fourth script. So yeah, go check out Price of Reason's channel. The link is in the chat here. And yeah, every Thursday we do Quantum Leap Revisited over on his channel, and it's a lot of fun. And we had a lot of fun tonight because I really liked talking about how this script had something and dropped the ball.
Right. And I enjoyed myself too. Always a pleasure being here. And, I think it's so cool that you've given me a number of opportunities to be on the show because it's always fun discussing screenwriting. I've studied screenwriting, but you actually did it as a profession. Or do it as a profession.
I do it as a profession. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't want to say did. That's not nice. I do.
No, it's okay.
But no, you know what I mean. I
do it as a profession, but I also used to do it too.
Right. No, I wasn't implying that you don't do it anymore. I'm just saying that you do it as a profession. You're a writer, and you have actual experience. And for me, this is always a fun experience for me because as somebody that studied it and didn't really go into heavily writing or really in that field, it's always intriguing for me to sit here and analyze scripts like this with you. And you're always very knowledgeable, and it's a fun time for me. So I'm thankful that I was here as a guest again.
Oh, dude, I'm happy to have you here. I can't wait for you to come back for some other scripts. Hopefully, there won't be the duds. But again, I can't predict that. I can only.
No,
I was hoping
good.
this one wouldn't be a dud, given the premise, because I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
I never hope that there would be a failure, but you know what? When it's a dud, I think that it's funny. It's funny that when we have to go over duds, like that has its own charm. Maybe the movie isn't good, the script isn't good, but our discussion is good.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you so much, Bryce. And then for those listening, thank you so much for listening. Please share this stream out, and if you are considering it, please feel free to join the Patreon. It's got a free tier for a week as well. It goes to support the channel, allows me to actually invest a little bit more in the production value of this, and allows the shows to keep on going and allows you guys to get a very different perspective on the very early stages of what screenwriting and story development and production, the going-ons of those things in the industry. So with that, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I can't wait to see you guys come back next week. And remember, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.